We are lighting the candle, a world that works. And I'm Bill Carell, and I'm here with my three, co-podcasters, Jan Jeremias, Lisa Sheehan, and Ken Caputo. We've been doing this now for a little over 2 years, it seems like, having a good time. And we've gone through a whole lot of episodes where we picked a word to be a central topic and a theme, and then expanded off of that by talking about things that are that, things that are like that, things that aren't that at all, and just plain had a good time. Now, today, given where we are in our economy, and given the state of how things are in terms of how much everything costs, I'm wondering if we might be able to have a reasonably good discussion for an hour or so around the topic of service. And I say this in terms of, that in every up market, service starts to decline until businesses start to go a little bit into the red. They're losing money, and now they have to whip their constituents and all of their associates back into shape to take care of the customer, because the customer is suddenly again king. And different companies do it differently at different times. I don't think they're all on the same sine wave. But what I have seemed to notice over the years, and I offer this for your approval, is that in good times, businesses tend to focus less on customer service and more on their own process. And when things start to fall a little bit off, the opposite is true. They suddenly decide that customer service is their way to get the numbers back up in the next quarter, and stave off the beating that they just took at the end of this quarter with the numbers coming in. Is there enough to talk about there? Would you like to expand on it? Would you like to do something completely different?
I think that could keep us going.
I can kick off with an anecdote from today.
Oh gosh.
Funny enough, old Bill has a recent story. So my wife left with the two grandchildren in tow to go and get some things on the shopping list. I will leave the names of any establishments out for their protection and mine. And let me just put it to you this way. It was a big box store that does pretty much everything in the world and has had an automotive department like forever. So her idea was she'll drop the car off, get the oil changed, go do some shopping and what have you, and then come back and pick the car up, right? Okay, great plan. And here's what happens. When you drop your car off, you always give them your cell phone number so that they can call you with an estimate or whatever. Well, about 5 minutes later, she gets a call and says, you got to come back here and you got to sign a waiver. And she goes, a waiver? What for? And the guy says, before we can change your oil, I just got to let you know there's no oil in the car. And she said, really? Is that so? And he says, yeah. He says, yeah, that's it. So I got to have this waiver signed by you. So she goes back and she signs the waiver. And she gets another call about 15 minutes later and says, we can't change your oil at all because the last people who changed your oil did not swap out the drain plug. Okay. Anybody ever changed their own oil?
Nope.
Yep.
Drain plug is pretty much analogous to your steering wheel. The one that you get with the car is typically going to be on that car when you take it to the junkyard 250,000 miles later. You might change the little metal washer that goes in between. So the whole idea, the notion that the drain plug hasn't been changed, I have no idea who these people are and why they've been allowed to work on people's automobiles. So Jan goes out, she parks it in the parking lot. She gets out and dutifully checks the oil level. It's full. So she says, maybe they're thinking about the automatic transmission fluid. She pulls that out. It's full. Struggles to get that back in because it's in an awkward place in our particular car. It's a Honda Odyssey. And then she gets home and she says, Bill, you got to come out and check me because I may be losing my mind here. These people tell me, first of all, there's no oil in the car. And second of all, they can't change the oil because the last people who did it didn't put a new drain plug in. And I said, these sound like particularly heinous crimes to me. Let's go investigate. Out we go. And then our neighbor comes out and she goes, your hood is up on your car. Is everything okay? And and so Jan goes and explains the situation. And sure enough, when I checked it, oil's full. It's dirty and needs to be changed. Funny enough. And then check the transmission fluid also. So here's the interesting story. This is the first time ever we brought our car to that particular big box store that does virtually everything under the sun and more. And then we usually go to this little thing, and I'm going to plug them, Foxy Lube. They have been in business around here for close to 25, 30 years. They do a fantastic job, in and out in 5 minutes. It's beautiful. Lesson learned. It wasn't broke. Didn't need to be fixed. We're going back to Foxy Lube. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So those guys just do everything. They come over and show you the dirty dipstick before they change the oil. They walk back around. They do this. They do that. They bring a new sticker to put up in the windshield, et cetera, et cetera. So service or following a corporate process and procedure to protect themselves against doing something wrong when they haven't got a clue what they're doing. It's interesting. So anybody else have any other stories about maybe some good service, or when you expected service and there really wasn't any interaction at all? Or how were you trained about service? What is that distinction for you personally?
I was of the but as an adult anyhow, I've always been under the up until like maybe a few years ago that I was under the belief that I was always going to get screwed. No matter who it was doing
as
what.
As a customer?
Yes, as a customer. That
caveat emptor,
trying
right?
to take me, they're trying to do everything, and I mean, obviously, automobile service is probably one of the worst as far as being able to trust. Um, and I don't know because I've never changed my oil, so they could have told me all that stuff. But then I did change my mind because it actually has helped me too because I would go to the the regular oil and lube places that show you every thing that's low and want to replace every single thing, and but they check everything, and I came to realize that I'm just going to believe whatever they tell me, and I'll pay for the new fluids and all that other stuff. And now my Jeep's got over 200,000 miles on it, so I don't do that every time, but like once a year I'll go to one of the big lube places and have my oil changed there. And I've had in and out experience with the same service center because they've changed their technicians or their managers. So I've had to change my attitude towards that too. And so I've got a really good one now, and I don't know if it's because of my belief or whatever that is now, but I mean, automobile is a great place to start, but that was my belief for a while that I was going to always get taken.
Did you ever notice that you did?
Well, you can never prove that you did or didn't. I had had particular problem with the Jeep. It's a problem the Jeeps are known for, and I went to a place that I thought I could trust, and they did a couple $1,000s worth of work, and it didn't solve the problem. But I needed whatever they did. So I didn't fight it or anything, but I came away with not feeling so good about it.
I'm interested in hearing Jan or Ken's input or take.
And go ahead, Jan.
You. Okay. So my first thing when you were telling your story yesterday, story, Bill, was reminded me of an experience I had yesterday. Actually, I went to a requirement for my health insurance, I went to what I would call much more of a traditional doctor as opposed to my lifestyle functional medicine doctor that I had. And what she said, and me thinking, leaving and thinking to myself, I've got to investigate all these recommendations that she's making. I've got to read, being in the health industry, that's like huge for me. And I'm not, my friend said to me, you're like me, you would investigate and say, do I really need to do this? Kind of thing. And that's the way I look at health, because health is having been in the health world, health is a service industry. I mean, any place where the patient is the customer, so to speak, and you come in and you expect service. Now, that being said, I don't take for granted that they know what they're telling that what they're telling me is like absolute gospel. So I go in and then take the information and grab it, and digest it and kind of come up with a plan, maybe consulting the doctor my doctor who I love. So that was my first, reaction to that story was, it sounds like my health story yesterday, where she sent me and said, I'm going to send you for this, 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 and this. And I'm like, hold on a second, let me think of and sit and read what the upcoming information is and see whether this fits for me and how this feels for me. Now, that being said, there have been times when in a more like sort of everyday type setting, I felt like I've been in situations where I wonder, like Lisa, like they could tell me anything and I wouldn't know. And I think that I'm the first to say that I am not handy at all. My brothers are. I always say it skipped me. And so if anybody comes into my house and tells me something's wrong, I really don't have a clue, And there are certain industries which, my mother, I guess it comes from your parents. My mother always said, be careful. Like if you have a chimney guy come in and he tells you need to like replace the liner or put on this, put on that, like just be careful. And so it's so interesting how some of that stuff is like kind of generational or is passed on. I guess maybe something happened to them, or maybe that was the way the industry was known of 50 years ago. I mean, I don't know, but it was just really funny when I would have circumstances like that. And I would think to myself, and usually I would go with people who had been recommended to me. So it wasn't like I was working blindly off of somebody I'd called from the phone book and didn't really know who they were. So it was someone who I called and I said, so I was kind of relying on them, but it was kind of an interesting place to be, to feel almost like in some ways, just have faith that someone's being honest with you.
To be fair, oftentimes people are honest about everything except for telling you they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, no, people have a hard time admitting they don't know or they can't help you.
Yeah, you get the person at the front desk who has to translate what the tech working on the car or maybe even what the doctor said, and then put it into either a text form, for your portal on the hospital thing, or, come back to you and say, here's what we need to do next. And then you go, why? And they have no idea.
Right. Exactly. Like they don't know why. Well, the doctor said so. And I'm like, well, great.
Well, see, the other thing is when you do that studying and you go and get third hand information, most people just ask their caregiver. And whatever the caregiver says that seems to make sense, they go with it, right? But in your case, you can be a partner with a caregiver by asking intelligent questions about stuff that you've actually read, as opposed to the first three things that come off of the top of his or her head.
Yeah. And I also think that I'm very, even if I don't know and I'm reading, I really take a long time to kind of ponder whether what they're telling me makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Like, is what you're telling me really makes sense to me? Considering, let's say, taking into certain factors into consideration if it's a health issue, like, age and gender and whatnot. Like, does this make sense with my lifestyle? Like the likelihood of this, what is it? And then weighing, is it worth the risk versus the benefit? Like a risk benefit analysis.
Sure.
my own health. And I think that's also because I decided that I'm going to take ownership of that. Like that's, my health is my job.
Perfect. Okay, Ken.
Well, so I think the way I'll approach this is I'll tell a story of me giving bad service, which has happened a lot through my life. As a small business owner, where you're basically responsible for doing everything for everyone all the time, you end up in some difficult situations at time. And I can remember I almost quit teaching martial arts in my first 6 months, and just I had a boy who was, and remember, I was not well trained in, I had no training in how to run a business. I was learning how to teach the skill, but I was, not even a black belt yet, and really still learning how to be an effective teacher. I knew nothing about customer service. I was learning all of this on the fly. I was just put in a position to try to run this school and keep it from going out of business. So here we are. So this boy, there were just some behavioral issues with him. And I decided after class to pull him aside and ask him if I could do something to help him want to pay attention in class more. I'm like, you seem to just not really focus very much. And just, I wasn't yelling at him or anything. I was genuinely asking because I was trying to figure this out. He burst into tears. And, and then mom comes in, sees me talking to her child who is crying, and absolutely flipped out at me. I mean, called me every name in the book, screaming at me, swearing at me. Who do you think you are, attacking my child like this? On and on and on. And it pretty much broke me. I got through the day and called the person, my partner, who's helping support me as best he could. I was there every day, but he was helping out, and told him, I don't think I can do this. I completely screwed it up. And he talked me off the ledge, and, and I learned from the experience. And throughout the years, there'd be times where I'd forget to order sparring equipment for someone and they'd get mad and it was my fault. There are times where I did everything right, and that wasn't good enough for this person because their perspective of what service was different from mine. And what I learned from that is, as whether the service is good or bad, I try to remember to see people as being humans who are doing the best they can. And sometimes that's not great, as opposed to this mother saw me as an automation designed to teach martial arts to her child in the way that she wanted it taught. I wasn't a person with feelings. I was a delivery system, right? And especially when you have when you have companies that are thinking about scale, right? They're, they don't have that direct contact. So, the guy who's, following the pickle map that they actually have to put the pickles in the right place at McDonald's, he's just doing what he was trained with, a very, very specific amount of information given to him to do it in a very specific way. Some people are better at following directions than others. Like, I became an entrepreneur because I would have sucked at that job, and because I'm just not good at following repetitive, what I see as boring, standardized directions. I need creativity and stimulation and that kind of thing. So, but if you put me in that position, I probably would have gotten a lot of complaints and yelled at by a lot of people. And it was just because I wasn't a good match, or maybe I hadn't learned to have a work ethic yet and no one taught me. It's, so I don't know. To me, there's so much context behind it that I find myself just, when I have a bad experience at a restaurant, I just make a decision. Usually I'll be like, I'll come back one more time. And if it's a bad experience a second time, this is capitalism. I just won't go there anymore. I'm not canceling them. I don't even really complain. It's got to be really bad for me to complain. I follow and go to places where the experience is more to my fit. And the funny thing is that restaurant's still there, and other people, for them, the experience is good enough that they appreciate it and value it. And if enough people feel that it's really poor service, then that restaurant won't be there for long, or whatever it is, the oil changing place, that kind of thing. So, but I guess in the end, I don't take it personally, but I see people as persons at the same time.
All right. 3 seconds worth of pause. I'm jumping in. So pre-COVID, post-COVID, a lot fewer dollars for a lot more delivery, almost anywhere across the board. My wife and I could go out to dinner probably to any one of our 6 favorite restaurants, and it was about $75 or $80 with tip. Beautiful meal, same meal that we're getting now. Now the food portion of it with cocktails adds up to $100, and then the tip is always $20 to $30 because I like to treat people the way I'd like to be treated. So that's the restaurant area. Automobiles on steroids. It's like everything is in increments of $1,000, and stuff like getting brakes changed prior to COVID. I would take my car in, and 4 brakes, we're talking rotors plus pads, no calipers or anything like that, maybe $500, $600. I just got them done again. It was $1,680.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, no kiss, right? It was really, really, it was not good. So this is on top of another experience. I've had my Honda we're almost at 200,000 miles. I think I have like 1,800 miles to go to flip it over to 200,000. And what I do is I take it in for every scheduled maintenance. I pay the cost, all the rest of it. Well, obviously during COVID, we didn't do that. We also didn't drive the car very often either. So we started having an issue with the gas gauge where sometimes with a full tank, it would go down to half or to empty. Thankfully, my wife drives it about 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon, and that's pretty much all it gets driven. So we just figured out, this car is in excellent condition. We have put all but 22 miles on it. When we bought it, it had 22 miles. And so we took it down to the Honda dealer. And in the early days, when we bought our cars there or other places, they would go over backwards to treat us well, give us free stuff, tell us you're going to get a phone call from Honda in the next 3 days. It really means a lot to us if you answer all their questions. Excellent. Okay. None of that goes on anymore. We drop our car off. They say there's a $160 diagnostic fee if you don't do the work. And I said, well, that's cool. I just really want to get the hit list. And so we get the hit list and we find out it needs this and it needs this and it needs this and it needs this. And I would like to play a little game called You Guess how much the total was that they were recommending that I spend on my car. This is last year at this time, mind you, that I spend on my car to put it back on the road and make it safe. Who's first?
$2,000.
I was going to say 5.
Oh, buy a car.
Yeah.
Okay, I will cut to the chase with you. This car has 200,000 miles on it, but it drives like a brand new. There's no leaks, no oil, no. Despite what the big box people said about no oil being in the car, it's in really, really good condition and it drives beautifully. The whole quote for 7 different jobs was $9,600. All in. I think the wholesale value of this car now, because it's a 2008, is probably around $3,500. And they looked at me with a straight face. Do you want to do it? I said, yes, I do. But I'm going to play a game called How Much Less Can I Get It Done for what you're quoting me? So the first thing, which had to do whatever it was, I took it to one of my local guys and said, here, we're going to piecemeal this. And first of all, you tell me what you think is important. They came back with 3 things, all in $2,200. Okay. And they did the first thing where it was the quote from the other, from the Honda dealer was $1,600, and they did it for 4. $400. So what I'm saying to you is that before COVID, we didn't have to wait for service, at a a brand auto dealer, and we didn't have to pay through the nose, and we didn't have to do this, and we didn't have to do that. And during COVID, and after the meltdown last time, there are so few dealers that are left. They're really not fighting with each other for business anymore. They all have more service business than they know what to do with. So consequently, they say nice things, they give you free bottled water, and I think that's where the customer service ends. And not for everybody. I'm sure I don't know everyone out there, but my recent experiences post-COVID have reinforced to me that they're operating to a different set of priorities than the customer coming through the door, I think.
It makes me think of Simon Sinek's book, Infinite Game. And he talks about, I guess it was back in the 70s when there was this real shift to the focus of a business was to make money, especially for shareholders. Like that was the purpose of the business, was to, maximize profitability. And he was talking about the infinite game is when you support a cause. And he uses businesses like Patagonia, who, they were designed, that business, their whole point was they wanted to create climbing equipment that wouldn't destroy the rock faces that they were climbing on. So, and their whole thing is they're a B Corp. So it's not about maximizing profit. It's about creating a balanced, impactful ecosystem. The purpose of the business is different. So, so I think that's probably part of what you're seeing is when, if the center of gravity is around, let's say profitability for ownership, if their profitability is going to take a ding, the cuts they make are going to be in other places, and if there's an increase in cost because of supply chain issues and production issues and all the other things that have had a pretty significant ripple effect going out, they're going to pass those on to the customers. So in the end, they're going to protect their own sustained profitability rather than have that reduced. And one of the interesting things you can look at, like a lot of public companies, they see inflation as a time where people are expecting to pay more, so they actually increase their profitability, so they make more money, sometimes as much as 50% more than they were. And so we're all complaining about paying more, but their fiduciary responsibility is to their shareholders first, so they're all happily watching their stock portfolios go up or whatever it is. And again, like you said, so I guess it's looking at where is their center of gravity. Is it on, sustaining and nurturing relationships with their customers? Is it weathering the storm of difficult times where, they don't have enough employees or equipment or whatever it is? I don't know. But I think that I've seen it all over the place. I've seen some of what you're seeing, Bill, and then I've seen others that were amazingly effective at streamlining and rallying around doing the best they could in a difficult time,
Well said. I think you pretty much covered the beach in terms of the social consciousness aspect, and also the looking to make their product compatible and sustainable with an earth that goes on forever. And what's really interesting about that to me too is it's been kind of a requirement of at least the last two youngest generations that people, everyone that they do business operate in that fashion, or at least say they do, and it's kind of interesting to me too, how out of one side of their mouth, like Nike and Apple and some of the other major corporations that have child labor and have the Uyghurs in China that are manufacturing their stuff. And, it is modern day slave labor. And quite frankly, they make the distinction that we really don't know for sure where all of our stuff is coming from. We place our orders with reputable companies, and how they fulfill them, that's not our problem until somebody looks into it a little bit more closely. And what we're seeing right now is most of the big corporations, the big brands, every last one of them is suffering at the moment, simply because people don't have discretionary income that they can go and spend the way that they did during COVID, when everyone was getting checks from the government, or not everyone, but many people were. So they upped their lifestyle. They didn't put it in the bank and save it. And people aren't buying new iPhones at a particular rate anymore. And there really isn't much from a consumer standpoint that the advertising really causes people to take action and, go into debt for any longer. And I think that many folks also are at the top of they're maxed out. So where does it go from here? How important is the social consciousness model that they've worked on, and how committed are they to the loyalty of their particular markets that they grew the business with? Or are they going to go into the mode of surviving that you were talking about and do what they have to do?
You were talking about COVID, because I think during COVID, so many more people went on social media, and then all these other community sites. I have a local community site, and everybody every day is asking for recommendations and or telling about a service that didn't go well.
Right.
And so it's everywhere. And I mean, so as a business person, I think they're much more aware of the fact that they could get blasted on social media if they don't perform. I mean, hopefully, or I'm thinking the good ones should know that and should, participate in such a way. So that I think that could have some influence on how people are being treated a little better now in some instances. But that's also the costs are going up too. Like you said, the restaurants, I know the ones that are doing well, and they consistently do well, but they're also consistently getting rave reviews on social media.
You get faced with a lot of difficult choices. I mean, in our restaurant, we could have dramatically increased our bottom line if we sold soda. Like, soda, a cup of soda that you pay $1.50 for costs like 7 cents. It's like ridiculous. It's so concentrated. And a lot of restaurants too, they make a lot of money on alcohol, So if you choose to not carry those things because we want it to be a healthy eating cafe, we're making decisions that reduced our ability to have enough cash flow to do all the things that business needs to do to be sustainable. And there's no way that we could, in our area anyway, we couldn't have increased the price of the food, because then people complain about that. And we would have, even though we're like doing rice battered chicken tenders in a convection oven, people are like, can I just go across the street and get McDonald's for 99 cents and eat it in your restaurant? So in the end, you're faced with a lot of difficult choices as to how to balance, so do these big companies, people don't want to pay more for their Nike shoes. So in the end, is the most effective way for them to keep costs low by using poor labor practices, because otherwise, the people who buy the shoes will start complaining and stop buying the shoes. And if no one's willing to take a cut in shareholder payouts, profitability, which is hard to do when you're a publicly traded company, so it's like, it's tangled, so, and even like, it's so interesting how perception plays a lot into this as well. Like I've seen conflicting things, like, Reuters is saying that spending has been going up, not steadily, but there's been more consumer spending relative to what was predicted. And, and that's why they keep raising rates, to try to tame the inflation, because people are still spending. But then you hear that spending is down. So, and a lot of that's just how you interpret the numbers or whatever. But a big part of that is confidence. So if people are afraid, like, remember the toilet paper thing? Everybody thought that we're going to run out of toilet paper, so everybody's buying up the toilet paper. And I remember reading an article on it, and it was fascinating. I guess they only supply like the amount, there's not really a reserve of toilet paper. So they make it as needed because it takes a lot of space to carry an inventory. So most places don't want to stack their shelves with a dry good that when they use that space for other things. So when everybody panicked and decided that maybe we're not going to have toilet paper anymore, it like broke the whole system. The factories were already making it at capacity. They were designed that way. So that one ripple effect, and then people are buying like truckloads of it and trying to sell it to their neighbors. And it's like,
So see,
it
there
was such
really
a
was
crazy
shortage
thing,
coming.
Well, and I
So, and it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If everybody
And
just
then
trusted the fact that just buy toilet paper as normal, that wouldn't have happened.
I
But
know.
people freaked out. It's like they said there was going to be a diesel shortage, and people are filling like bathtubs with diesel. And again, so it's like there's so much nuance to it. It's fascinating. I mean, I don't even have answers to any of this. I just find it interesting how it's not as easy as to just turn it into a talking point, or or something you can point a finger at and say it's that. It's crazy.
Right. And again, the logic and thinking of the listener is always tuned to historical, whatever they understand made up the numbers before. So for instance,
Right.
when you're talking about inflation that is actually somewhere around 30%, it's not 6% or 2%. If you go and you look at the 19 things that made up the preponderance of the consumer price index, which was in place, historically from the 1980s until this last winter, all of those items had gone up double digits, and some of them 20 or 30%. So to get to an 8% number out of all of that, and to get that down, they actually changed the indices so that it doesn't contain any of those things anymore. And they're working off of something that's a CPIE, which is what are the things that elderly people spend the most amount of money on and buy the most frequently. So that it's what they're doing is they're tuning it to people who are on fixed incomes so that it's more relevant to them. And funny enough, it's now 3%. You know, isn't that magic how that works? But the other thing too is that when you're talking about the comparison of how many dollars versus how many units, they never tell you how many units it takes to make the dollars. And when prices for the commodities go up 20 to 30%, you're selling less units and almost doubling your sales volume is what that ends up doing. So the old thing that we always were taught in accounting, that figures don't lie, the liars know how to manipulate the figures, right? And the other fun thing to say was, well, what is 2 + 2 equal? You ask that of the mathematician, he says 4. You ask that of anybody, any other ilk. You ask that of a CPA, and he says, what do you want it to equal?
Mhm.
So we're all in that zone of, and this is the part where there's not really a litmus test for you to be able to come back into a conversation with any meaningful retort that you can go and substantiate with hard and fast information somewhere. You always have to take a look at the skeptical side of it. And I don't remember, I think Janet was you saying, I like to question the information. And that's a healthy place to sit, where you're really asking an intelligent question. Well, okay, so, and I did this when we were talking about the inflation only being 6 or 7% last year. And they were talking about the major commodities, and oil and gas and those sort of things their usage had gone down because they shut the pipelines off. And so they were touting that as, being a very positive thing for the economy because people weren't spending on that at the rate that they used to. Yeah, they can't get it because everybody's got diesel in their bathtub. So customer service, where is it?
Again, I think it's, if you look at where's the money going, it's, if you have poor service and say it's a small business and they're understaffed constantly, and the owner is cashing out, and buying mansions and, that, going on trips to islands. That's one situation. Whereas if, that owner's on the floor and they're all fighting to keep the business afloat, and it just happens that there's not enough cash flow to do more, that's a very different situation. So, so I don't know. I don't even like pay that much attention to inflation as much as just where's the money ending up? Is there money pooling, and who's it pooling with? And then I just kind of pay attention to that as an indicator of the philosophy behind that particular business. So, like I read about Texas Roadhouse, and the way they were incredibly good and responsive at switching to curbside during their leadership did a phenomenal job of kind of pivoting, and they really, really invested in a lot of things that made it easier to provide quality service and keep the food up and keep their people safe, regardless of what city they were in and what the mandates were, all that stuff. They just focused on doing their work well. And then other ones were screaming and yelling about, the government, or, how bad it was, and, and monetizing that into likes on YouTube or whatever, So it's like, it was just always so interesting to me, how in the end, you just kind of look at the leadership and their philosophy, and that tells you a lot about, I don't know. For me, it's just who I want to feed my attention to and who I want to support, as best you can. It can be hard to get that information, but that's kind of what I found it's more sensible to look at.
So you know what kept all of those restaurants in business? The most profitable thing on their menu, being able to have cocktails go out the door, which had never happened before in our state. Been against the law for somebody to take an open cocktail out the front door to their parked car. And what they figured out was these restaurants are not going to survive just on food. Cost of everything has gone up. Cost of their staff, the people that come in and prepare, has gone up. But you give them the opportunity to make 70, 80, 90% on a cocktail, that makes all the money for that particular order when people order it to take out. And there's two $13 martinis, that go along with it, or that sort of thing. And why we don't behave that way all the time, I don't know. It's conditional. And what's the thinking that goes into it's okay here, but it's not okay there?
Well, I would imagine that the concern would have been that people were going to order their cocktail and then sip it on the way home and create an unsafe environment. So, and so it's always interesting. I mean, I think there's value in pivoting and getting creative because situations change, and being responsive to that. And certainly seemed like during the pandemic, people were drinking a lot more. I think
that's a true story.
There's a lot more consumption of alcohol,
Well, they were considered essential, I mean, that was one of the first things considered essential.
Keep liquor stores.
And having friends who work in the addiction area, addiction recovery and addiction area, that was huge. I mean, they had a huge problem with it being readily attainable and people not having to drive to go to work. So basically could get online and be, 3 sheets to the wind and
just not saying anything.
Yeah, so isn't that interesting? So now you've got this, you're faced with a couple of very difficult choices. It's like you're trying to support, part of our economic infrastructure, which are businesses, while at the same time supporting the humans who are facing very difficult situations with isolation, and all that kind of stuff. So these were very hard choices with no good answers. And, I think the thing that frustrated me the most about it was there wasn't a lot of discourse, the difficulty of resolving these things. There was just a lot of screaming and I told you so's and disagreement or not liking, a lot of anger and pushback rather than crap, this is not good.
Right.
You know, and whatever we do, it's not going to be good. How do we do the best we can until we can get out of this,
Yes.
and then have an honest assessment of what went right and what went wrong, so we can actually prepare if it ever happens again, instead of just being more entrenched about how we'll never do this or that or whatever, you know.
Right. Because I don't think, like you said, I don't think it's black and white. I mean, I think for certain people,
No.
like, to me, you know, whether alcohol was readily available or not doesn't matter to me because I don't drink. You know, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't apply to me personally. It does bother me and I'm worried about it. Let's say for people who have an issue, which I think, you know, that readily accessibility with being in a home environment, which is probably maybe crazy with kids around trying to work and very stressful and economically very precarious and everything. And it's like creating the perfect storm for people that have, you know, issues with, let's say, substance abuse or whatever. And then, you know, trying to keep businesses alive and afloat and the economy going at the same time.
And if you think about it, if you just removed their ability to get alcohol, for a lot of people, if they're heavily addicted, that'll kill them. They'll die in their homes from withdrawal symptoms, you know. So, and you know, and now you've got an overwhelmed healthcare system and people that are not, you know, like, they're knowing that they're okay, maybe less likely because, you know, they're not going into work the same way or whatever. Yeah, there's like, it's complicated. There's so many different lenses you have to kind of think through, and there was no solution. There
I
were just options to try.
yeah,
You
no,
know.
I taught in a place which was basically like sort of like a day facility for people who had addiction issues. And so when COVID struck, they were all shut down. So you had
Oh,
places where these people went and had people who were basically checking on them every day to see where they were. And all of a sudden, you know, there's no one checking. They don't have access to these people. Some of these people aren't online. So there's no way to check in and say, okay, even Zoom wise, like, how you guys doing, whatever. And there was this kind of like, okay, today you can come in and today you can't, and we can't monitor you
yeah.
and we can't check in. And so it was so complex. And it's in situations like that where I sit there and I think to what you said, Ken, it was like, what could we do differently? Like, how could we make this system function better so
Mhm.
that if something happens, we're better able to cope and people will not, you know, people will not relapse or go down. And maybe some people will, but how can we prevent, you know, too many people from, you know, going backwards instead of forwards, or at least staying where they are?
And don't you think some
Yeah.
of those things were addressed because of COVID? You know what I mean? I think some of those things got at least looked at because they hadn't experienced such a situation before. And I think some things have gotten better, right? I mean, at least they know that there's an alternative or some place, or they've figured out how to reach those people or so. I just know things have improved in that respect.
Yeah. And I think that they
Well,
realize that someplace that they really have to like look at, that they
Yeah.
have a plan or an alternative system in
but
place.
again, you know, we're talking about a very small percentage of the pre-COVID population having these issues and problems. And they got the correct amount according to the priority of our culture prior to COVID, during COVID, and post COVID. Not the correct amount that you and I would choose. But if you stop and you think about it, this is the first time ever in the history of the United States that I'm aware of that they ever shut the country down. And if you go back and you check the statistics worldwide, the number of people, the number of the population that actually got COVID was less than 10%. That's the number of people that got COVID. So I think most people are real interested in why 75% of our population were deemed to be essential workers. You can go back and you can look at that statistically. There were very few compared to the 300 million people that we have in our country. there were very few that were actually in lockdown. And I don't know how people feel about that now. And I'm wondering if there's some sort of a correlation or at least a correspondence between how people thought they were being treated during COVID, being told what they can and can't do, about being kind of singled out. Did you get your vaccine or not? Are you wearing your mask? Do you have enough cats in your house? All of that stuff where pressure was brought to bear. And I'm wondering, what you guys are hearing from your friends, and if the whole idea is, do you remember what the heck was the name of that? We're mad as hell network. The guy goes to the window and he hollers, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." And then everybody in the United States goes to their window and they're all hollering, right? And I just wonder, if there's a lesson that could be strong enough and would penetrate into the core of our culture that would tell us the next time we need to do this, and we need to do it at a higher level of thinking than we did this last time. Or if most people just want to say that was a one-off and we ain't never going to go along with that again.
All I know is I always think of, I learned 3 questions from this business book called The Road Less Stupid. And it was just, what's the upside? What's the downside? Can you live with the downside? And, having a business, especially with children, and thinking the upside of us, we went to all virtual, and then we went to social distancing. We followed all of the rules, the mask, everything. Of course, people complained, people didn't like it. I'm thinking the upside of following these rules is to keep everybody safe. And the downside is, if it doesn't infect 10%, if it affects 90% and kills 50% of them, I can't live with the downside of killing one person because I didn't want to take the safest route possible, even if it was the wrong route, So in the end, I was less concerned, even honestly, about my business than I was about the lives that were being impacted and doing the safe thing. And you know what? If it was all baloney and not a single person had more than a sniffle from it, not knowing that in advance, it's great to look at it in hindsight and play armchair quarterback and reflect on all the things and who made selfish choices and which government did better, whatever. I don't care. All I know is, in the end, if this were to happen again, I'm going to do the safest thing possible because I don't want to kill someone inadvertently, So that's just the way, we didn't know. We had no idea. I remember sending the first email saying we're going to close for 2 weeks, hopefully this will all be over then. And we didn't know, and then we had increasing pressure from some people who, I'm not training if I'm wearing a mask. And we're like, according to the town, that's, I'm not going to push back against that. We still don't know. There's conflicting evidence as to how safe that is. We did the best we could to follow the rules that made the most sense, that would cause the least harm, with the information we had at hand. If we were lied to, so be it. That's on them. Just trying to be responsible. So, and frankly, that's what I would do again. And if we get taken advantage of or we're wrong, I'd rather err on the side of thinking about being as safe as possible for the people in my care. That's what it came down to for me.
So I think we all had that same perspective, and probably all still do. My question is, you and I speak for you and I, and you and me. The rest of the voices, where do you think they are in all of this? And what are you hearing about other people who are expressing concern about all of the things that you said you can live with and you do it again? But in their particular cases, there are a lot of people that spent their entire, net worth during COVID and now since post-COVID, that all of the things that have gone on have not only affected them from a health standpoint, they've affected them from the ability to grow, their generational wealth, take care of their families, And quite frankly, there's an interesting increase in people suddenly coming up with the following problems. Um, I know more people that have had heart bypass surgery in the last year and a half than probably the previous 10 years that I was aware of. I mean, literally previous 10 years. More cancers, especially more liver and spleen and major organ cancers. And anecdotally, it really makes you go, what's up with that? I don't have a clue what's up with that. Is it just something that we are more aware of and more people are talking to me about it? Is it just the little group of people that I hang out with? But what I'm saying to you is that as we walk through life, is there anybody that has the same kind of swagger and confidence and belief that tomorrow's going to be better than yesterday was, and that our kids are going to be better off than we were when we were kids, or our grandchildren will be better off than we were when our grandparents were kids? I don't know that I hear too many people talking about that, and I wonder if that cultural change has gone into the area of how we treat each other with respect and love and customer care, and just honoring each other as human beings.
I think it
Uh,
goes along with what Ken was saying somewhat too, is that I only will, you know, give my money or spend my time with places that do respect me. At least I try to do that.
Yeah.
And I think my group of friends, because I am one of those positive people that, but I also think that I know some, especially, my friend's son is in his young 30s and is getting a vasectomy because he doesn't want to bring children into this world. Um, and that's heartbreaking to hear. But I think people not, I don't think it's anything new that people think this earth is not, or there's who wants to bring children into this world. It's just so horrible. That's nothing new. That's generations old.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I worry part of, myself is, when the oceans are hot tub temperature, and that kind of thing, and species are getting a little more sooner extinct. But I mean, I believe in a consciousness raising society. I am participating in those kind of things, and I think I have that kind of influence on my friends. I think most people are like, I'm glad this is over. I don't know of them, I'm not in the my friends aren't the doomsdayer building, survival places, or, stocking up on tin cans, and they're just not that kind of, we're going to live our lives as best we can, and hopefully the people that are serving us well, and if they're not, then we just don't go there anymore, and we're all going to take classes and try to make better choices for us and the planet, kind of thing. But I mean, that, I know it's a simplistic kind of a viewpoint, but that's kind of my specific personal circle is going there.
And I'll speak to my circle because I just had this conversation with a friend of mine right before we got on. We have somebody we know quite well whose husband is our age and went to sleep and didn't wake up on Sunday night. And so she called to tell me, and I was just like, and I just turned to her and I said, it brings me to this place of gratitude. Like, I just have to be so grateful for the people in my life, for who I have, for what I do. And that's where I went, because otherwise I felt like overwhelmed. And I have had a number of situations come up around that, like with people in my life telling me, about severely ill spouses or whatever. And I was, I said to her, like, how do I not become overwhelmed in this kind of space? And my next sentence is like, gratitude. Like, that's all I could come up with. And I think that and this kind of element of personal responsibility of, I have to do everything I can to make the world a better place. And in doing so, hopefully I have some sort of, I have some impact to make others kind of feel the same. And that's the kind of, I think those are the people I'm surrounded with.
Would
Yeah.
say that charity begins at home, and so does empowerment and the world being a better place. And the neat part of having this knowledge and this information, and I think all four of us come from the same place. We are, we've got the concerns that we have. And I don't know that any of us is adjusting our lifestyle into, twisting it out of shape, changing what we do and who we are as a result of either what happened during COVID or post COVID. And I just very interested in changing the whole narrative where all the media and social media is, if you were to put it all into one cup, it would be, there's something wrong around here. And you should be very afraid because now the seas are as hot as hot tubs. Well, I saw
I
that.
find that quite concerning, honestly.
Yeah.
Well,
I know there's a lot of reasons for it, but
remember
100
those three
degree ocean
questions? Is it
temperatures
true?
doesn't sound healthy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's no 110-degree water, in the subtropics. Okay. So the point is, why hyperbole on every single thing to sell advertising? Okay. And so the more people are upset, I saw that. Do you know where I got that headline from, Lisa? Was the Weather Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get it on your phone?
Marcia.
Did you get it today on your phone?
I know. I'm trying to remember. There's
I
probably a
didn't
headline.
get a chance to go chase that into a rat hole, but I'm very interested
Wow.
in seeing what the facts actually say, But every single thing has some kind of clickbait associated with it when it comes through the social media now. So I see something like that and I go, well, that's quite kind of interesting. I wonder what they're selling today, because the Weather Channel does do a lot of advertising. I believe that our conversations where we're talking about people having access to empowerment for themselves when they choose, I think it's a good conversation, and I think it's one that people need to have more access to, and they need to have some more muscle with, and they need to be willing to get it wrong. You can give up worrying for a minute or two to have a great life for a minute or two. Don't worry, your worries will be over there in the corner. They'll come back and find you, after you're done having a great time. But I would just say, you at home that are listening, we are arguing for the world is a good place. We're arguing for it's worth you investing your time in and acting like you're going to be here for the rest of your life and build that kind of life. Be willing to dream again. Be willing to think about your grandchildren and your grandchildren's grandchildren. And if somebody tells you that the world's not going to be here then anyway, and don't worry about it, they've been saying crap like that since I was a kid. So all you
know
gotta
what, though? Eventually they're going to be right. May not be in our lifetime, but eventually they are going to be right. So
100,000 years from now,
so
absolutely.
now we're at what we're talking about with gratitude. You don't know that. I mean, who knows? An asteroid could wipe out the planet in 20 years. Nothing's certain, So, and I'm not saying that I'm not doom and glooming it. I'm just saying, I just think that it's important to, if you're in a difficult time, whether you want to admit to it or not, or you agree with how difficult it is, who are you going to be? I think that's what we're really talking about. Who do you choose to be if the oceans are 100 degrees, who do you choose to be knowing that? That's all. So, and if you feel like in my circle, it's all people thinking, okay, I'm not capable of cooling the oceans, but I'm capable of being this kind of person who can contribute in this way to help other people navigate difficult times. And then other people are going to say it isn't true, or they're going to, get angry at someone and look for blame or defending it or whatever, whatever. We all get to choose who we're going to be, I guess is my point.
Thank God.
And many people don't realize
Yeah.
that. And that's a new idea for most people, that they can choose how they're going to be.
Hmm.
But the cool thing? So yesterday, I was just cooling down after going for my run around my apartment. And this guy just like pulls up alongside of me, young guy, he rolls down the window and he's like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know, I keep going back to the gym because of you." I had no idea who this guy was. He says, "I see you out here, just running in the heat and just you." It's like, if you can do it, I can do it. I just get myself to the gym. And he like leans out the window and shakes my hand. And it was so funny and so random. And I wasn't preaching. I wasn't talking about how important exercise is. I believe that. I was just living my life and running. And that impacted someone in a positive way just by being me. And I think that's the thing we have to remember. It's like I had no idea. And it turns out quite a few people have noticed me doing that. And I didn't know that they noticed. So in a way, I'm helping some people be healthy without trying to help do anything other than keep myself healthy. It was funny.
So along those lines, for some of us that are not in Ken's peak performance shape, which he is, by the way, he is an extremely amazing athlete and he works very hard at it. But you and I can do other things. For instance, when I was in Colorado, I was in Target driving the car around the outside of the building while I was waiting for Jan and one of the grandsons to come out. And there was this woman with 2 shopping carts all by herself going across, the driving area to her car. And she had to take one cart and then she came back for the other cart. I sat there and I waited for her until she was complete with both of those. And then when I drove by her, I rolled my window down and and she looked at me and she said, "I'm so sorry for making you wait." I said, "You didn't make me do anything at all. It was my privilege and pleasure to give you your space to do what you needed to do." And she looked at me and she said, "That is so sweet. Thank you very much." And with this big grin on her face. So you always have the opportunity, but funny enough, it usually comes not necessarily when you're thinking to yourself. It kind of usually comes when you're interacting with other people and you choose to bring a really good thing into the conversation authentically in the moment, authentic to what it really is. And when somebody gives you credit for it, they are actually bringing it full circle by acknowledging that there's some difference that they chose to make in their life, and they're using you in that way as the reason for doing so. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So any more thoughts? Service.
I think full circle with service. I wonder if that's kind of for me, it's just recognizing that if you're the one that can be, practice kindness and grace, even when you don't get the quality of service you want, maybe that's a good model that could help, bring the temperature down. I feel like some people are so stressed at this point, they're just looking for a reason to blow up. So, so maybe that's one little thing we can do, be graceful even in the face of bad service. Doesn't mean you have to go back there, but, and don't be taken advantage of, but be kind. I'm sure you weren't disrespectful as they were messing up the oil change. You were just, also noticing that was not acceptable, but there's a way to voice that without being too intense about it, I guess,
No idea what got said. I think my wife just said, "Thank
Yeah.
you, I will take the car away."
I'm
And
sure
I
she
also
did.
want-
Yeah.
I'd like to add one little thing here. There's a possibility that all of us are in service to other human beings, and how we behave with somebody who's having an absolutely horrible day, not servicing us the way we think they should. What if the kindest thing we can possibly do is just to ask them what kind of day they're having? and maybe lighten things up with a little bit of a joke and some levity. And if you can do that for people and put just a little tiny change in the trajectory of their day, and I see it's not something that only one person gets. You don't deliver that to somebody else. You get it together, and the world actually in the moment gets to be a better place.
Well, I would even take it a step further, Bill, is I wouldn't even say you have to bring levity. I mean, I would just say smile. You know, it looks someone in the eyes and actually, you know, see them and then smile and thank them. Really, people just want to be acknowledged.
100%.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Good.
So I'll leave you the way I do every week, and that is, here's your opportunity to smile, or email somebody, or send them a text, or a phone call. Just let someone you know, like, and trust and love know that the world's a better place because they are in it and you care. And if you do that enough times, you'll have a good day. And maybe some of the people that you share with will have a good day too. So thank you all. Lighting the candle, a world that works. Bye for now.
Have a good week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.